So generally, we know of Eros as relating to sexuality, relating to everything erotic. And obviously in Greek mythology, Eros refers to the god, which refers to sexuality, to pleasure, to desire. But actually, Eros is a lot more than that. I consider Eros a process, a transformational process that takes me back to wholeness, to oneness, and to the truth of who I am. So what I want to do with that is I want to dissect and unpick a little bit what that means for me. The transformative process that takes me back to the oneness and wholeness that I am. So what I mean by that, essentially, of Eros as a process, if we go back to the Greek mythology, to the idea that Eros is the god of pleasure, sexuality, desire, and all of that, Eros in earlier Greek mythology was actually considered a primordial god. The primordial gods are the first 12 elemental gods that relate to the coming into form of everything in existence. Okay? So what I mean by that is that it's the idea that everything emerges from this complete void. Everything that comes to life, that comes into any kind of form, emerges from this complete void and comes into form by some mysterious process before it becomes something that can be experienced in this realm. So some of you have heard me talk about this before. Science has proven that there are two essential realms or fields that make up our universe. There's the non-local and the local. So the local is everything that we can touch and feel and measure. The non-local is the infinite. It's everything that we can't measure, that we can't touch, that we can't feel, that we can't necessarily sense in that way. And so when we talk about the process of coming into form, that process that is Eros, we're talking about how that process by which everything comes from the non-local, the void, the infinite, and comes into form that can be touched, that can be used, that can be experienced in this realm, right? And so does that make sense so far, everything I'm saying? A really good example of that is the way we come into form. You know, that like a sperm and an egg, you know, they connect and in an orgasm, and they create this single fertilized egg cell, which then, you know, turns into an embryo, which turns into a fetus, which turns into a fully formed human being. That's this mysterious infinite process that takes something from that land of the infinite, that realm of the void, into something that turns into form. It's like the way that a seed, you know, turns into a plant, that turns into a tree that drops flowers and fruits and berries for us to feed from and nourish from. That's the mysterious process of coming into form. And so for me, Eros is that process. But as well as being the process of coming into form, it's also the process of dissolving out of form and into complete chaos, complete dissolution, complete void. So this is something that, if we look at various interpretations of Eros over time from different people, like Plato, for instance, who is a famous philosopher, some of us might be aware of his work. Plato always talked about Eros being the place between divinity and humanity. The place between that place that we can't necessarily name and touch and access, and what comes into form. And it's the place in between. And that refers to what we're talking about here, that process. And Sigmund Freud, for instance, was saying the opposite. Sigmund Freud was actually like, well, the Eros is actually the process that takes me from the form into the dissolving, into the void. And so what that refers to for me is how we live in this world where we have specific ideas that were formed about who we are, about who I am, and what my world is about, what I think reality is. And those ideas are often limited, and they keep me in a limited place. That's form. And Eros can be a process that can, as well as taking me from the formless to the form, can also take me from the form to the formless. Meaning that when I'm limited by these ideas of who I am, of what the world is in this form-based way, I can use Eros as a force or as a process that can allow me to move out of that limited space, that limited expression and experience of my life into the limitless, into the absolute, into the void. And so this is what this is about. To summarize, Eros is a two-way process that goes from complete void to form, and also from form to complete void. And someone like Plato, the philosopher, used to say that, you know, to know the true beauty and the true wisdom of life, we have to know the void. We have to know the absolute truth. And that's what this is about. It's about Eros being that place that reconnects us to all of that. Now, Eros became known later on as a sexual god, or as relating to sexuality, because we realized that sexuality was the way that things were created. Sexuality was the way that life came to creation. And so it moved from being, Eros moved from being about all creation to being about sexuality, because sexuality was at the root of everything. And obviously we see that with the fact that the orgasm creates, again, like I said, you know, the embryo that creates a human being. So when we're talking about Eros, we're talking about something that's much greater than sexuality. We're talking about the movement of the flow of life. Yeah. And that movement of the flow of life is the truth of who I am, is what takes me to the truth of who I am. Because, like Plato would say, the only absolute truth is the void, is that void in which we are one and everything is oneness. Does everyone get what I mean when I say the void? That kind of, yeah, I know it's super abstract and it's super conceptual, but it's that place when I transcend all the stories of who I am, all the narratives, the storylines, all this expression, this limited expression of who I think I am in this world and how I think things are in this world. And when I transcend all of that, I get to the absolute truth, which is that everything is one. And so Eros is about transcending everything that keeps me from understanding that truth. Yeah, and sexuality is one way of doing that, because as you know, as a lot of you know, in the work that I do, I often talk about the orgasm being an energetic occurrence that takes us to oneness, that allows us to experience that oneness, that wholeness, that void, while being in human body. So sexuality relates to Eros in that way, the bringing us into the formless place, the void. So